When it comes to being in business, what we really have to be focused on to have long-term success is profit. And without profit, we really aren't putting ourselves into a position where it's going to be viable for us to remain in business. So the interesting thing that comes up often with clients that we work with, and let's face it, for ourselves as well, is this whole thing around the money mindset that can either really help us to have a thriving business, or it can really hold us back from having a thriving business. And it's the blocks that we have along the way that we need to unravel and unpick and challenge and change in order to be able to make that next leap forward in our business. So I thought I'd start by perhaps let's get on the same page around what do I mean by money mindset. And really, it's as simple as it's a unique core set of beliefs of what you think about money, what you think about wealth, and what you think about financial success. And so when I say unique, it's different to everyone. And the reason why it's different to everyone is because we all have such a unique and different way of growing up, the influences we have in our lives, the family, the culture, the location, the socioeconomic group, the role models. There's so much that goes into it. Even within a family, you can have siblings who have different money beliefs because they have different experiences they grow. And so this really is such a personal exploration when it comes to what could be holding you back as the owner in the business to take your business to the next level. Because what often happens is we'll come to a block somewhere. So you will have an energetic level that you tend to kind of remain around until you have that sort of next breakthrough. And in our discussion today, what I would love for you to take away from this is for you to consider maybe there could be something a little bit funky going on in my mindset that is, if I was to challenge it and remove it and overcome it, it would make the next phase of business easier. And wouldn't that be amazing? So, Nick, tell me, when it comes to, fears and blocks around money that we might have, I touched on and alluded to our upbringing and our childhood. That is one area that we can source money blocks from. And also, I think money traumas that happen through our life beyond childhood, where we're in a situation where, our basic needs are challenged and stretched because we don't have the money to be able to do, immediate level of Maslow hierarchy of shelter and all that kind of thing. So they can be extreme and they can be in the moment, but they all kind of build together to put us into a position where our beliefs might be holding us back. So let's start with childhood stories, beliefs, sayings. What were some of the ones when you were growing up that are just, that you might have uncovered over the years as an adult, but just were ingrained? Things like money doesn't grow on trees. Money is the root of all evil. Another day, another dime. What were some of the things that were coming up in your childhood that you heard?
Well, what an intro, Ness. I really, this is such an important part of business that if we're not across it and aware of it and don't focus on it, it can really sneak up on us and bite us on the butt, because this impacts every part of our business, and there can be underlying sabotaging, self-sabotaging that can happen without us even realizing. And I love interesting about the money trauma, and I'm not overly familiar with that, so I look forward to picking your brain a bit more around that. But when we look at the childhood and the beliefs, it's really funny because I don't have a specific saying that that I remember being said, but what I do remember is this feeling of there's never quite enough money. So we've got to really look at exactly where our money. Like I remember my mum had this little, her little diary, like, you got the little diary, and then the budget. And she was always really, really good at budgeting, and had to be because, she was a single mum for a lot of part of my upbringing, but then also was co-parenting with my dad when I was a bit older. She was a single mom when I was younger. And even when they were together, you know, we were 3 kids. We grew up in housing commission. So we didn't have a lot of money to play with. And I wonder even then, so there wasn't even phrases around money. It was just more around, you know, making it last, stretching it. And I think what's super interesting as I've grown up and identified my own patterns of money and spending, and, you know, particularly to where I am now, and it's no secret, you've been my money coach for a while, and I'm so grateful for that. And I've worked with different money coaches, and reflecting on my patterns of spending, what I realized is that it almost came through as quick. It would leave as quick as it came. And there was a fear almost there around it's going to go away anyway. I may as well spend it and enjoy it because it ain't going to be hanging around to last. So I know that's like a bit of a detailed sort of answer, but it's interesting because, again, it stems from that childhood experience of where does money come from, or it comes, but there's not, there's not much, and it has to really stretch and last. And seeing that play out as an adult, and then actually realizing, okay. And there's lots of factors. There's so many different factors that come into our spending habits. But yeah, I mean, it's so interesting to see when you have grown up with not a lot of money, and then you're building business, or you're in corporate career and you make good money and then make a lot of money, and that whole process. Yeah. And, working through all of that. What about for you? You touched on a couple, but what's your sort of experience around this been?
I think it's one of my favorite topics ever. Yes. Because I think there is the memory that we have about the things that happened in our childhood, or the sayings that happened. But I love that you touched on the feeling around money, because sometimes money, so in our upbringing, nothing against my parents, but we just didn't discuss money. So it was private. It was something never discussed, never on the table. We always had food and, holidays and all that kind of stuff. I think we did okay, but it was a paycheck to paycheck kind of position. And that money doesn't grow on trees. I must have heard that as a child, because I said that to my kids when they were little. What do you think? Money doesn't grow on trees, when they want to buy the latest this is. And it wasn't until, they were older that I started really exploring and getting deeply into wealth creation and really understanding all of this, that it came up, and it plays out in business. And I think what we don't know, or what we know subconsciously but aren't consciously aware of, the pattern or the experience or the belief is going to show up in the business around that situational. So the whole, your experience around being able to make money, but then it goes. And then my experience, I think this is what I really had to change when I started my business, was you have to work hard for your money.
Yeah, that's a big one.
And I remember when I was in corporate and I was in a senior leadership position, and I lived in country, regional Victoria, and I'd have to drive to Melbourne for meetings, that my colleagues and peers lived in Melbourne, so they didn't have a 4-hour journey ahead of them on the way back, and things would come up and, have to get babysitters and blah, the whole story. But I remember there was one guy I worked with, I'd bring up and have a bit of a complaint about every now and then. And he always said to me, "That's why you get paid the big bucks." And I used to want to punch him in the face, because it just reinstated that belief around, oh, okay, well, I have to put in all these hours. I have to do this level of work. I have to hold this level of responsibility, and I have to say no to things, and, have other people look after my children, because I get paid a lot of money to do what I do, which again is relative, isn't it? Because I look back on those days and go, I wasn't actually paid great money to be able to do that. And I think that then what happens for us when we start our business is we bring those stories into business, and it plays out. And for me, what I had to unpack was not only this whole theory around I have to work hard for money, but also this theory around I didn't have any role models who had run a business for me to see success. The only person I knew, my ex-husband, when we got engaged, maybe when we were married, no, before we got married, he started a business and it didn't succeed. And so my only role model was him. And my mum and dad had sort of, like, my dad was in the Navy for many, many, many years, his whole career. My mum was a legal secretary for a very long time. And so paid work, especially government paid work, was safe and secure. And then I break the mold and come out and create a business where we're told by social media that we can work 4 hours a week and have $1 million. And there's always that we should be here, we should be there, we should be doing that. And there's so much judgment, I think, that comes with where we are financially in life at any point in time. Like, I think we have this really harsh view around, I should be at this level, I should be earning this much money, especially when we see other people supposedly making it look really easy. And that's where I tie it right back to what I said at the beginning. I'm not interested in your turnover. I'm interested in your profit. And the gap that you have between your expenses and your income is your profit. So if that's really low, or if in some circumstances with some of the people we come in contact with who run their own businesses, they're not paying themselves, I'm always curious to know what's driving that. What is it that you picked up as a belief along the way that means that you will pay other people before you pay yourself? And I'm not talking about the startup phase, because we experienced startup phase with not being able to pay ourselves a regular wage. But it was never, ever off the table. As soon as the money came in, it would be, this will be what goes to our wage. And we were always talking about the numbers. So whereas I think for some people, and maybe it's that martyrdom around, I've got to look after others first, or this is just the side hobby, or, what we hear. It's just crazy that we take it on board and it plays out in a way that is negative or detrimental to us. And if we are working our guts out and not making profit and not paying ourselves, the resentment towards our businesses can build very, very quickly. And let's face it, towards our jobs, if we're not feeling rewarded in other ways other than monetary. Because I know when I was getting paid the big bucks, I would have quite happily have not had to do those, 4-hour drives on a Friday night and miss out on part of the weekend with the kids. So what about for you? What do you notice in relation to how money beliefs has impacted you as a business person?
There's a lot that you said in there, Ness, and you talked about guilt, and I think there's a couple of things. There's the guilt factor in a lot of different ways. Like, I even remember actually in corporate, I earned, well, I can't say more money than anybody in my family, but then in my immediate family. And like I distinctly remember it kind of was okay in corporate, but in business, when I hit a certain threshold, there was a whole bunch of feelings of guilt that I earned more than my dad, which was really interesting. And you talked about the hard work. He was a truckie, he was a laborer, he worked at the bananas, and then he would come home and it was physical, hard labor. And I really had to work through a lot of feelings around that. There's so many, guilt comes into play in so many different ways. And I also think the other thing is when we're talking about, people not paying themselves. And for us, as painful as it was, we still talked about it every week, even though we looked at the numbers and we're like, it's not happening, but right now, because we've got expenses, etc. But like you said, it was never off the table because it was a priority. But people don't know. Sometimes it's an education thing, isn't it? They don't know how to do it any different. Plus, you overlay the guilt factor. If I'm paying myself and I feel like I'm letting other people down, or how do I do that? Because I do have to pay other people or pay vendors or suppliers or whatever it might be. So there's so much in here around actually knowing what to do. Again, I didn't have a lot of exposure to people who probably more the wealth creation piece, which played out in my mindset and my behavior. The spend, it comes in, it goes out just as easily. And full transparency, that is something that I think you helped me uncover. That was just a couple of years ago. So this is a pattern that played out when I did have a successful business, when I was earning good money. I remember other examples at a family barbecue maybe 5 years ago. I'm all about, like, if you want something, you put it out there, you talk about it, you tell everyone about it, eventually it'll happen. You take the action, obviously. We're not talking the secret, just visualize it and you have it, and you take action. But I was talking at a Christmas barbecue, family barbecue, and I'm like, right, this was early days of my first business. Next year, I'm going to hit I think it was 200K. It was like I'd hit the six figures. I want to hit 250. And I'm just talking about it openly. And then I learned, actually, maybe don't do that.
Right.
Because you talked before about perspective. When I first got my first 6-figure corporate job, I was like, wow, this is how am I even going to step up to the plate and do this? Because this is getting paid big bucks. And now I look back and go, yes, I'm not saying it wasn't good money, but it's not what I've earned since then. So the perspective, right? And so even for some people, 200K is like, that's easy. That's, that's spare change. For other people, it is huge, and they never could even conceive how they might earn that much money. So I also learned, look at my audience, look at where I'm talking about things, still talk about it. But it was almost like the naive Nikki was just telling everybody. And then I realized there were some uncomfortable feelings around that. So there's a lot in that. And I've kind of shared a few different examples around that experience and the mindset that has to be worked on, because it's not linear, is it?
No.
It is at the core. For me, it comes back to that little girl, that certainly it's not like we didn't not have food or anything, but like I said, there wasn't a surplus, and the Kmart docs instead of the real docs, and then saving up for the real docs, all of that, which isn't uncommon. This isn't but again, just the role models we see around us, the feelings of guilt when we surpass our parents or key people in terms of the money. And I have to really keep check of this now, because even talking to my mum, we've got different values around money. So, for some people, the baseline level is enough. And for others, they want more, and it's okay to want more. This is something I still work on now. It's okay to want more. It's not that my mum doesn't have a great life. She travels a bit and all of that, but it's very different. And you talked about siblings. I look at my 2 sisters, again, very different, same upbringing, very different. One works in corporate, wants to work in corporate. The other obviously still works, but, has a very different lifestyle, works part-time. So, it's just really interesting how these beliefs play out. But I think the core, I'm rambling now, Ness, jump in and say me.
Well, there's
any of that even makes sense? What are you taking from that?
Oh, I love it. I love this conversation. And what I take from it, when you talked about, at the barbecue and talking about the goal that you wanted and picking your audience, because what often happens is, and this backs up my belief that I grew up, you don't ask people what they earn, you don't talk about money. Can't ask somebody what their salary is. That's rude. But what happens is, when you put yourself in an environment like that, you're bumping up against everybody else's money beliefs that have come from their childhood and their money trauma. And they are projecting their belief system onto you, and then you're taking that on board. And so if you're surrounding yourself in business with people who find it difficult to talk about finances, are uncomfortable having conversations about how to grow your business, you're hanging out with people that aren't going to help you grow your business. So it's around getting the people around you, the mentors. It could be a book, it could be a coach, it could be other business people who are achieving or wanting to achieve where you are aiming at, and looking at what support can I get. Because I will tell you that if you are around people who are further ahead of the journey on you, they have learnt their lessons and they're ready to share that with you. So finding community is really important. And I think that what happens is, I said earlier, the childhood upbringing is one aspect, and then the money trauma is another aspect, because when you combine the two, it can influence your decision making. And so I think about, for me, my style, and it probably aligns with, a lot of my behavioral profiling and all the other thing, but I'm more of an accumulator. I like to see the money in the bank and, let that build. Whereas other people are more about spending and having things. And when I was married, my ex-husband and I had, you couldn't get further apart from our money story, from the way we dealt with money. I wish I had had more counseling about that before marriage to understand how to deal with it. But some of my money trauma came through that adult phase of life, where, we were, especially when I took time off work to have children, because I was the main income earner at that point. And he would spend it. I would be earning money and I would come home from work and he'd go, oh, I've just spent $5,000 on that today. And I'm like, what? And so it played out in that relationship, so that when we did divorce and did our property settlement, it was really empowering to come back and go, oh, it's mine again. Now I get to control where it goes and choose that. But because having money was really important to my sense of security and that mattered. That was my foundation piece. It meant that I would kind of hoard it and not spend it much. And it meant that in business, it influenced the targets that I went for and how I felt about achieving that, and the belief that it was going to be taken away from me, or all of that kind of thing. So it's just fascinating when we lay it into that. And we talked earlier about how I had done, I'm just going to have a cough now, Leah. Yeah. Sorry about that. I'll go on mute. It reminds me of when we were doing the work together around the money coaching. And this is really interesting because we're in business together. And so we have two lots of, it's like a partnership, like a marriage, I guess, in that sense, that we have to come together and understand that our money beliefs are impacting the decisions we make in our business. And I think that that's really interesting as well, because that puts a whole nother layer on it. And this isn't to say we've got to overanalyze everything, but I think it is about helping us understand where are we kind of sitting on a scale around our mindset, in order then to be able to look at ways to perhaps overcome the challenges or push through, because like everybody in business knows, it's a roller coaster ride at times. No matter what your income is, you will always have the lesson to learn. Definitely. Denise Duffield-Thomas, who's an amazing money mindset guru out there, talks about wealth itself will not cure your money blocks. If anything, it's actually just going to amplify them. So that thought that I'm struggling in business now, but when I get that turnover, when I hit that marker, everything will be easier. It's a fallacy, because whatever stuff you haven't dealt with at this level of income in your business is going to show up until you deal with it at any level. And we've talked to people who are on much higher turnover than what our business is, and they say the same thing. There's always that feast and famine at some point, because then the perhaps the expectations around having that level of income are set so that anything that knocks you back is going to be felt just as much as it would if your business is starting out.
And I think this is why it really matters so much, because we've just identified two very different money patterns between the two of us: the holding onto, the hoarding, the spending, and then the more we don't work on our mindset, the more we can fall into that place. And whether we've got more money or less money, the pattern is still there. That's what you're saying here, isn't it? The behavior is still there. So unless we're aware of that behavior, regardless of how much money is in our bank right now, and work on that pattern and that behavior, then it doesn't matter the dollar amount, the quantity. No. And that is if there was one thing that I think our listeners could walk away with today, I think that's a really, really powerful realization and reminder, because sometimes we know that we've been there and then we go back again. But as long as we're always moving forward, like that's you said, new level, same devil, we're constantly growing. But remember, you're not where you were 2 years ago, 4 years ago, because you've continued to work on your mindset. You've continued 100%. To invest in yourself. Ness, I think we're going to have to do another ep around this money mindset, because I love listening to you in this space. And there's so much that you can share that's of value for our listeners and selfishly myself, because this is a really great reminder for me. I'm reflecting and going, okay, cool. I need to check in with that. What's coming up for me? Because this is an ongoing process. We never arrive at this stuff. So if there was one thing that our listeners can do, one action that people can take from this episode today, we like to say in the next 24 hours, what would that be? What would you like us to do?
Okay, well, what I would love is if something has come up for you as you're listening to this. Maybe it was one of those childhood statements that we grew up with, like, you got to work hard for your money, or if you resonated with either of our examples or stories, or realized what your money story is in here, the one that could be influencing the outcome in your business. What I would love you to do is to write it down, grab a pen and paper, write down the belief. And if you're struggling with this, you could write the sentence, I would be earning more in my business, but everything after a but, or I don't earn exactly what I want because everything after because is your money story, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's have a look at that and then answer these questions. There's 3 of them, but one has 2 parts to it. But bear with me, team. So the first question I want you to answer is it true? Is the belief true? The second question is, what if it wasn't true? So what would be different if you didn't believe that? Because in some circumstances, like money doesn't actually grow on trees. But what's the underlying belief behind that, right? So what would be different if you dropped that saying out of your life? What could be different? And then the third is, I wonder what could be truer. Because this is challenging your beliefs, because those stories are the things that need to be unraveled to be able to help you move forward. And until you really sit down and examine what that is and how it's playing out in your business, in your life, then it's just going to be there in the background without you ever really realizing that that's what could be creating the situation that you're in right now financially. So I'll just repeat them really quickly. Is it true? What if it wasn't true? Or what could be a different belief? And then I wonder what could be truer. And I would love you to go away and do that. And of course, reach out to me on LinkedIn, reach out to Nikki on LinkedIn, or just get in touch by any other means if you're wanting a little bit more support with this, because I love talking about it. It is so important, especially as women, that we focus on wealth creation. And as business owners, we really must. It's imperative that we have profit in our business. So let's get the funky beliefs out of the way and continue to achieve a profit margin. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ness. I just want to say thank you for sharing these insights, because it is really powerful, and it's a reminder to again take the time around this. And we talk a lot about prioritizing life just as much as making and managing money. When you can get your profit percent, when you can be paying yourself really well, then you can actually create that life. You can really thrive in all areas of your life. So thank you very much. Listeners, keep an eye out maybe over the next coming months, because I feel like we're going to have to tap into more expertise and insights from you as our resident money coach, Ness.
Amazing. We just skimmed the surface. There's so much more.
So much there. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Have a great week.